Olivia Parker, 29, stood in her wedding dress, alone in the bridal suite, mascara-streaked tears rolling down her cheeks as she stared at the text message from her mother. "Sorry, honey can't make your thing today." Trevor's championship game got rescheduled. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. Olivia laughed bitterly. Apparently, her wedding wasn't a once-in-a-lifetime event worth attending. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today for this story. Before I continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Family betrayal hits differently when it happens on what should be the happiest day of your life. If you've ever felt the sting of being the less important child, hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling family. Now, let's dive into how my parents' football obsession led to the ultimate family showdown. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, I was always the responsible one. My parents, Richard and Margaret Parker, never missed an opportunity to remind me how mature and self-sufficient I was compared to my younger brother, Trevor. "You're just so easy, Olivia," my mother would say, as if being low maintenance was something to aspire to. Trevor, 4 years my junior, was the golden child. The football prodigy whose potential athletic career eclipsed everything else in our family dynamic. From elementary school through high school, my academic achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods, while Trevor's touchdowns warranted framed photos and celebratory dinners. I graduated valedictorian of my class, giving a speech to an auditorium where my father arrived late, and my mother spent half the ceremony answering texts about Trevor's upcoming football camp. Later that night, they apologized for having to cut the celebration dinner short because Trevor had an early practice the next morning. College was my escape. I received a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University, where I flourished in the business program. Those 4 years gave me space to build my own identity away from my family's skewed priorities. During holidays, I'd return home to find my childhood bedroom gradually transforming into a shrine to Trevor's athletic achievements. My high school awards collected dust in the attic, while Trevor's participation trophies occupied the living room mantel. When I landed a prestigious marketing job in downtown Chicago after graduation, my parents' congratulatory call lasted exactly 4 minutes before transitioning to Trevor's recruitment prospects. I began spacing out my visits home, protecting myself from the familiar sting of indifference. Then I met James. Unlike my family, James saw me, really saw me. An architect with a quiet confidence and wry sense of humor, he valued my ambition and intelligence. On our third date, he asked about my family, and I found myself unloading years of pent-up resentment. Instead of dismissing my feelings, James validated them. "It sounds like they've been missing out on knowing an incredible person," he said simply. As our relationship deepened over the next 2 years, James met my family on several occasions. He observed the dynamics with a detached curiosity that I envied. "It's fascinating," he said after one, particularly Trevor-centric Thanksgiving. "They've created this narrative where Trevor needs their constant support to succeed, while you're expected to thrive without it." When James proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, my first thought wasn't about wedding plans. It was dread about including my family in such an important moment. James suggested a radical idea. What if we create a day that's truly about us and the people who genuinely support us? The idea began as a joke between us. What if we didn't tell my parents it was a wedding? What if we invited them to a special event and let them decide if it was worth attending? But the more we discussed it, the more the plan took shape. This wouldn't be about revenge, I told myself. It would be a test, one final chance for my parents to show up for me without the explicit obligation of a wedding. James was concerned. "Are you sure this is the right approach?" he asked one night as we lay in bed, discussing the plan. "What if they don't come? Won't that hurt more?" I stared at the ceiling, contemplating his question. "If they don't come to something important to me even without knowing it's my wedding, then I'll finally have clarity. I've spent my whole life making excuses for them." maybe I need to stop. We decided on an intimate ceremony at a boutique hotel overlooking the Chicago skyline. We would tell most guests it was a wedding, of course, our close friends James's family, even some of my extended relatives. But to my parents and brother, it would simply be an important celebration that I'd really love them to attend. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, my mother's questions were minimal. Is this a work thing? Should we dress up? Why is it on a Saturday? I gave vague answers saying only that it was a significant personal milestone and their presence would mean a lot to me. We'll try our best, honey, my mother said distractedly. But you know, Trevor's football season is in full swing. He might have a game. I bit back the retort that burned in my throat. I understand, I said instead, but this date is fixed. I hope you can make it. I gave them 3 months' notice, surely enough time to plan around one afternoon. As the wedding day approached, James worried I was setting myself up for heartbreak. His parents had immediately cleared their schedules, even changing previous travel plans when we announced our date. They'd been involved and supportive throughout the planning process, filling the parental role that mine had abdicated. What will you do if they bail? James asked, 1 week before the wedding. I squared my shoulders, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Then we'll celebrate with people who choose to be there, and I'll finally stop waiting for my parents to become different people. 2 days before the wedding, the text came. Trevor's team had made it to the regional championships, and the game had been rescheduled to our wedding day. My mother's message was apologetic, but firm they couldn't miss Trevor's big moment. I stared at my phone, a strange calm settling over me. For years, I'd competed for scraps of my parents' attention and lost to football games, practices, and recruitment meetings. This final rejection wasn't surprising. It was clarifying. "We're so sorry, honey," my mother wrote. "You know we'd be there if we could. Maybe you can record it for us." I responded with a simple, "I understand," and turned off my phone. James found me sitting on our apartment balcony, watching the Chicago sunset with dry eyes. "They're not coming," I told him. Trevor's game got rescheduled. James sat beside me, taking my hand. "I'm sorry, Liv." I squeezed his fingers. "Don't be. This is exactly what needed to happen." And in that moment, surrounded by Chicago's glittering skyline and holding the hand of someone who had never made me feel second best, I meant it. Planning a wedding while deliberately withholding that information from my parents required strategic precision. James and I created 2 separate invitation lists, the informed group who received traditional wedding invitations and the uninformed group, essentially just my immediate family, who received elegant but vague invitations to an afternoon celebrating Olivia and James. To maintain the ruse, I registered for gifts only through a private registry shared with those in the know. I scheduled dress fittings when I knew my mother would be at Trevor's practices. When my mother occasionally asked for details about the event, I deflected with comments about wanting to keep things a surprise or mentioning that it was just a special celebration with close friends. "But what are we celebrating exactly?" she pressed once during a rare phone call. "Mom, it's important to me." "Can that be enough?" I replied, knowing her discomfort with emotional conversations would prevent further questioning. It worked. She quickly changed the subject to Trevor's latest scholarship offer. James's parents, Caroline and David, were fully aware of our plan. Initially concerned, they came around after witnessing a particularly painful family dinner, where my parents spent the entire evening discussing Trevor's football statistics while showing zero interest in our recent promotion or the home we just purchased. "I get it now," Caroline whispered to me as we cleared dishes, while my father analyzed Trevor's throwing technique in the living room. "You deserve better than this, sweetheart." Caroline became the mother figure I needed during wedding preparations. She accompanied me to dress fittings, helped address invitations, and listened to my anxieties about the big day. "Whatever happens with your parents," she assured me, "you're gaining a family that sees your worth." My best friend Zoe, who'd witnessed my family dynamics since childhood, enthusiastically supported the plan. "It's the ultimate test," she declared, as we selected bridesmaid dresses. "And if they fail, you can finally stop hoping they'll change." Not everyone approved of our approach. My therapist, Dr. Chen, expressed reservations during our sessions. "I understand the years of hurt behind this decision," she said carefully, "but beginning a marriage with a test for your parents might bring more pain than resolution." Her words gave me pause, but not enough to change course. "This isn't just a test," I explained, "it's self-protection. If I tell them it's my wedding and they still prioritize Trevor, I'll be devastated on what should be the happiest day of my life. This way, if they don't show up, it's just confirmation of what I already know." As the wedding date approached, we finalized details with our vendors, all of whom were briefed about the unique situation. Our photographer promised to capture the day authentically, including any family drama that might unfold. Our wedding planner, Miguel, found the situation fascinating from a psychological perspective and helped craft contingency plans for every scenario. What if they show up late? What if only one parent comes? What if they leave when they realize it's a wedding? Miguel and I created response strategies for each possibility, which gave me a sense of control amid the uncertainty. The hotel venue was selected specifically for its multiple entrances and private spaces. We arranged for my family to be directed to a separate waiting area upon arrival, where the wedding coordinator would explain the situation before bringing them to the ceremony, if they chose to attend after learning the truth. 1 week before the wedding, I sent a reminder text to my parents. "Hope you can make Saturday's celebration. It starts at 3:00 p.m. at the Lakeview Hotel. It would mean everything to have you there." My mother's response was non-committal. "We'll try our best, but Trevor has a practice that morning. If it runs long, we might be late." I showed the message to James, who wrapped me in a silent embrace. No words were necessary. We both understood what was happening. The night before our wedding, I had a moment of doubt. James found me on our apartment balcony staring at my phone. Thinking of calling them, he asked gently. I nodded. Part of me wants to just tell them the truth. Give them one last chance to prioritize me. James sat beside me. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I thought about it for a long moment before putting my phone away. No, I need to see what they choose when they don't feel obligated. When it's just about supporting me, not fulfilling a parental duty at a wedding. James nodded, understanding the years of hurt behind my decision. Tomorrow is about us, about building something new. Whatever happens with your family, we're starting our own tradition of showing up for each other. That night, I wrote a letter to my parents, explaining my decision to be given to them only if they came to the event and discovered it was my wedding. In it, I poured out years of feeling secondary of achievements, overlooked, of loneliness even when surrounded by family. I ended it by writing, "This wasn't a trick to hurt you, but a final attempt to see if I matter enough for you to show up when it's just about me, not about obligation or appearances. Your choice today tells me everything I need to know about our future relationship." I sealed the letter, hoping it would never need to be delivered, yet knowing the probability that it would. The morning of the wedding arrived with a crystal-clear September sky. As my bridesmaids helped me prepare in the hotel suite, my phone remained silent. No messages from my parents confirming their attendance or apologizing for their absence. Zoe watched me check my phone repeatedly, her expression sympathetic. "Try to be present today," she encouraged, adjusting my veil. "Focus on James, on your friends, on the people who showed up not just today but every day." I nodded, took a deep breath, and turned off my phone. Today would be about moving forward, not looking back. I was marrying a man who loved me, completely surrounded by friends who had always seen my worth. If my parents couldn't be part of that, perhaps it was time to accept that reality instead of fighting it. As I prepared to walk down the aisle toward my future, I felt a strange sense of peace. The absence of my family created a space that was quickly filled by the authentic presence of those who had chosen to be there. Maybe that was the lesson I needed to learn all along. The morning of my wedding day dawned with a perfect Chicago autumn crispness. Golden sunlight filtered through the hotel suite's windows as I sat in a plush robe watching my bridesmaids bustle around me. Zoe arranged my makeup station while my college roommate Ellie steamed the bridesmaids' dresses. James's sister Vanessa arrived with coffee and pastries, her excitement palpable as she handed me a latte with a heart swirled in the foam. "How are you feeling?" Zoe asked quietly, setting down my wedding shoes, blue suede heels that James had helped me pick out months ago. I considered the question carefully. Strangely calm, I admitted. "Like whatever happens today, I've already made peace with it." My phone chimed with a text. My heart jumped before I realized it was from James. "Can't wait to see you. Best day ever starts in T-5 hours. Still nothing from my parents." The hairstylist and makeup artist arrived at 10:00 a.m., transforming our suite into a beauty station. As I sat in the styling chair watching my reflection gradually become more bridal, I allowed myself to enjoy the moment. My bridesmaids shared stories and laughter popped champagne and created the joyful pre-wedding atmosphere I'd always imagined. At noon, the wedding planner Miguel appeared with an update. James and his groomsmen are all here. His parents are helping set up some family photos in the lobby. The florist just finished the ceremony arch, and it's stunning. Everything's on schedule. He hesitated before adding, "Any word from your family?" I shook my head. Nothing definitive. "But the ceremony isn't for another 3 hours. Miguel nodded professionally. "We have staff watching all entrances. If they arrive, we'll implement the plan we discussed." He squeezed my shoulder supportively before disappearing to manage the next crisis. The photographer arrived to capture getting ready moments, Zoe zipping me into my dress, Vanessa helping me step into my shoes, Ellie securing my grandmother's pearl earrings as something borrowed. These women had shown up consistently throughout my life, creating a sisterhood that sustained me. "Your dress is breathtaking," Vanessa gasped as I stood before the full-length mirror. The ivory gown with its delicate lace overlay and subtle beading was elegant without being ostentatious, exactly what I'd wanted. "James is going to lose it when he sees you," Ellie predicted, adjusting the dress's train. At 2:00 p.m., Miguel returned. The guests are beginning to arrive. James's parents are greeting everyone. "Do you want updates if your family shows?" I took a deep breath. "Yes. Let me know the moment they arrive." If they arrive. The next hour passed in a blur of final touches and photographs. My bouquet of white peonies and eucalyptus arrived. The bridesmaids changed into their sage green dresses. Champagne was poured and toasts were made. At 2:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the ceremony, Miguel appeared at the door, his expression carefully neutral. "Your parents just texted the wedding coordinator at the entrance. They said they're running late because Trevor's practice ran long, but they're trying to make it and should be here in about 20 minutes. I nodded unsurprised. "So they'll miss the ceremony." "Most likely," Miguel confirmed. "Would you like to delay the start time?" I exchanged glances with Zoe, who raised an eyebrow questioningly. The temptation to wait flickered briefly before I extinguished it. "No," I said firmly. "We'll start on time. The people who prioritized being here deserve a punctual ceremony." Miguel nodded with approval. "I'll let the officiant know we're proceeding as scheduled." As 3:00 p.m. approached, my bridesmaids lined up in the hallway, ready for their processional. James's father, David, appeared to escort me down the aisle in my father's absence, an offer he'd made weeks ago, sensing it might be needed. "You look radiant," he told me, his eyes crinkling with genuine affection. "We're so proud to welcome you to our family." His words warmed something inside me that had been cold for too long. I took his arm gratefully, the weight of my father's absence lighter than I'd expected. The ceremony space was transformed into an elegant garden setting, with white roses, climbing trellises, and soft lighting creating a romantic glow. 75 guests turned as the music changed, signaling the start of the processional. I watched from the doorway as my bridesmaids walked gracefully down the aisle, each catching the eye of her assigned groomsman. Then it was my turn. David patted my hand reassuringly as we began our walk. I fixed my eyes on James, who stood at the altar looking handsome and slightly stunned in his charcoal gray suit. The moment our eyes met, everything else faded away. The absent parents, the years of disappointment, the elaborate ruse. All that mattered was the journey toward this man who had never made me feel like an afterthought. The ceremony was everything I'd hoped for. Meaningful without being lengthy, personal without being oversharing. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. James promised to create a home where you are always the priority, never the alternative. I vowed to build a partnership where we both feel seen, valued, and chosen every day. We exchanged rings under a canopy of flowers, sealing our promises with a kiss as our guests applauded. As we turned to face our friends and family as a married couple, I scanned the crowd instinctively. No sign of my parents or Trevor. The expected pain was there, but duller than I'd anticipated, overshadowed by the genuine joy radiating from the people who had shown up. The cocktail hour began immediately following the ceremony, with guests enjoying champagne and hors d'oeuvres in the hotel's garden terrace, while James and I took photos. The photographer captured our first moments as husband and wife against the backdrop of Lake Michigan, the Chicago skyline, creating a dramatic setting for our wedding album. It was during our couple's portraits exactly 47 minutes after the ceremony concluded that Miguel approached discreetly. "They're here," he said softly. "Your parents and brother just arrived." The coordinator explained that they missed the ceremony but could join the reception. They seemed confused and asked what kind of celebration this was. When she told them it was your wedding, your mother became quite upset. "They're in the side parlor now. Would you like to speak with them?" I looked at James, a silent conversation passing between us. He squeezed my hand supportively. "Yes," I decided. "Bring them to the bridal suite, and bring the letter I wrote." The moment of reckoning had arrived. The bridal suite seemed smaller somehow as I waited for my parents to arrive. James stood beside me, his hand steady on my lower back, a silent affirmation that I wasn't facing this alone. Outside, our reception continued without us, the sounds of celebration floating up from the garden terrace. When the door opened, my mother entered first, her expression a complicated mixture of shock, confusion, and indignation. My father followed looking bewildered in his business casual attire, clearly not dressed for a wedding. Trevor slouched in behind them, still wearing his practice clothes, his discomfort palpable. "Olivia, what is this?" My mother gestured vaguely at my wedding dress, her voice sharp with accusation. "We were told this was your wedding ceremony, that we missed your wedding." I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm. "It was, and you did. How could you not tell us you were getting married?" My father's confusion seemed genuine, as if the possibility that they'd been deliberately left uninformed was inconceivable. "I invited you," I said quietly. "I told you it was an important celebration. I gave you 3 months' notice. I asked you repeatedly to be there at 3:00 p.m. today. But you didn't say it was your wedding." My mother's voice rose with indignation. "How were we supposed to know? Would it have mattered?" I asked the question hanging in the air between us. My mother blinked rapidly. "Of course it would have mattered. We would never have missed your wedding." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because 30 minutes ago you texted that you were running late because Trevor's practice ran long and you were trying to make it. Not rushing. Not dropping everything to be here. Just trying." Trevor shifted uncomfortably by the door, studying the carpet. "That was before we knew it was your wedding," my father said defensively. This is completely unfair, Olivia. You set us up to fail. Did I, or did I finally stop setting myself up for disappointment? I moved to the dressing table and picked up the sealed letter I'd written the night before. Everything I want to say to you is in here. But the summary is this. I wanted to see if you would show up for me when it wasn't a capital W wedding that socially obligated you to attend. When it was just something important to me without the weight of tradition or expectations. And you made your choice. My mother's face flushed. That's manipulative. You deliberately deceived us, and you consistently prioritized Trevor over me. Have since childhood. The words flowed easily now. Years of unspoken truths finally finding voice. I needed to know if that would be the case today, on what should be the most important day of my life. My father looked stricken. That's not fair, Olivia. We love you both equally. Do you, Dad? Because I can list every milestone of mine that you've missed or arrived late to because of Trevor's sports. My college graduation, my master's thesis presentation, my promotion celebration. Every time Trevor's games or practices took precedence. Those are completely different situations, my mother protested. Are they? Because today, once again, Trevor's practice was more important than being on time for an event I specifically told you was significant to me. Trevor finally spoke up, his voice uncharacteristically small. I told them we could leave practice early. I didn't know it was your wedding, obviously, but I said we could go. My parents shot him a betrayed look, and in that moment, I felt a flash of sympathy for my brother. He was as much a product of their dysfunctional priorities as I was. James, who had remained silent, now stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, I love your daughter more than anything. Today is supposed to be about celebrating our commitment, not about past hurts. You're here now. You have a choice about how to proceed. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Whether from genuine remorse or the social embarrassment of the situation, I couldn't tell. I don't understand why you would do this, Olivia. Was it to punish us? I shook my head slowly. It was to free myself. If you hadn't shown up at all, I would have had my answer about where I stand in your priorities. The fact that you came even late, even for what you thought was just an event, gives me a sliver of hope. But the way you're responding right now, making this about how I've wronged you rather than reflecting on the patterns that brought us here, that's telling too. I handed my mother the letter. Read this. Then decide if you want to join our reception as the parents of the bride or if you want to leave. Either way, I'm going back downstairs to celebrate with the people who showed up for me, not just today, but consistently. I turned toward the door, James beside me, when my father's voice stopped me. Wait. His voice cracked slightly. I'd like to read the letter, too. Something in his tone made me pause. I glanced back to see my mother already opening the envelope with trembling hands. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had my parents' full attention. My mother read aloud, her voice catching on certain passages. Every time you missed a piano recital for Trevor's practice, a piece of me learned I wasn't worth prioritizing. When you left my college graduation dinner early, I stopped expecting you to celebrate my achievements. I've spent years making myself smaller, less needy, less visible, trying to be the easy child you always praised me for being, not realizing that being easy meant being overlooked. By the time she finished reading, tears streamed down her face. My father looked ashen, one hand gripping the back of a chair for support. Is this really how you feel? He asked hoarsely. Every word I confirmed quietly. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the distant sounds of our wedding reception continuing below. Trevor stepped forward, his expression serious. Liv, I had no idea. I'm sorry. His apology, simple and seemingly sincere, unexpectedly cracked something open inside me. It's not your fault, Trev. You didn't create this dynamic. My mother wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara slightly. I don't know what to say. We never intended to make you feel this way. Intentions don't change impacts, I said gently. And now we're here. Today is supposed to be joyful. I've spent enough of my life feeling overlooked by you. I won't spend my wedding day that way too. I smoothed my dress, preparing to return to the celebration. You can come downstairs if you want to be part of today. But I need you to understand that this isn't just about one day. It's about our relationship moving forward. If you want to be in my life, something needs to change. My father nodded slowly, a dawning recognition in his eyes. I think we need to try. My mother looked up from the letter, her expression raw, with a mixture of defensiveness and dawning realization. I don't agree with how you did this, but I understand why you felt you had to. It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it was something. A crack in the facade. A possibility. James checked his watch. Our first dance is scheduled in 15 minutes. You have time to freshen up if you'd like to join. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. We'll be there, my father said firmly, the first decisive statement he'd made about one of my events in years. As James and I left the suite to rejoin our wedding reception, I felt lighter somehow. Not because everything was resolved, it wasn't and might never be completely, but because I'd finally spoken my truth. Whatever happened next, I'd stopped contorting myself to fit into the space my family had designated for me. You okay? James asked as we waited for the elevator. I leaned against his shoulder, the man who had always made space for all of me. I am. For the first time in a long time, I really am. Hey everyone, can you believe that confrontation? Family dynamics can be so complex, especially when you've spent years feeling overlooked. If you've ever had to have a difficult conversation with loved ones, you know how much courage it takes. Before we continue with what happened at the reception, hit that like button if you're invested in whether my parents actually joined the celebration, and subscribe to hear more stories about complicated family relationships and how they can sometimes heal in unexpected ways. Now let's see what happened when we returned to our wedding reception. James and I returned to the reception, stepping into the elegantly decorated ballroom where our guests mingled cocktails in hand, unaware of the family drama unfolding upstairs. The string quartet played softly in the background as our wedding planner Miguel approached, eyebrows raised in a silent question. They're coming down, I confirmed, feeling a strange mixture of apprehension and hope. Can you find them seats at the family table? Miguel nodded efficiently. Of course. Your in-laws already asked me to reserve spaces just in case. James's parents had more faith than I did apparently. Our entrance was announced, and applause filled the room as James and I made our way to the center of the dance floor for our first dance. We'd chosen At Last by Etta James, both for the beautiful melody and the fitting lyrics. As James took me in his arms, I briefly scanned the room. No sign of my parents yet. Stay present, James whispered, reading my thoughts as he often did. This moment is ours. He was right. I refocused on him, on us, as we swayed to the music. James had insisted on dance lessons, and it showed in the way he confidently led me through a simple but elegant waltz. When he dipped me at the song's conclusion, our guests erupted in cheers and whistles. As the applause died down, I noticed a commotion at the ballroom entrance. My parents and Trevor had arrived, my mother having hastily applied fresh makeup, my father looking uncomfortably formal in his business casual attire. They hovered uncertainly at the periphery, clearly unsure of their place in the celebration. James's parents, Caroline and David, immediately crossed the room to greet them. I watched as introductions were made, Caroline's warm smile and David's firm handshake bridging the awkward gap. They guided my family toward the reserved table, making room in a celebration my parents had nearly missed entirely. The reception continued with dinner service, the clinking of glasses and murmur of conversation, creating a pleasant background to the occasional burst of laughter. From my seat at the head table, I observed my parents. They seemed subdued, my mother picking at her salmon, my father nursing a glass of scotch. Trevor, meanwhile, had struck up a conversation with one of James's cousins, who coincidentally played college football. After the main course, it was time for toasts. James's father stood first, champagne flute in hand. When James first brought Olivia home, he began his voice warm with affection. Caroline and I knew immediately that she was special, not just because of her intelligence or accomplishments, though those are impressive, but because of how our son looked at her, like he'd found his home. His words brought tears to my eyes. David continued, "In the time we've known Olivia, she's become a daughter to us. Her strength, her resilience, and her capacity for joy despite challenges have been inspirational to witness. James, you chose well. Olivia, thank you for choosing our son and for becoming part of our family." Zoe spoke next, recounting our 20-year friendship with humor and insight. "Olivia has always been the responsible one, the planner, the achiever," she said, glancing meaningfully toward my parents. "But with James, she's found someone who encourages her to pause, to play, to prioritize herself sometimes. That's what true partnership looks like, each person helping the other become more fully themselves." When the toasts concluded, I noticed my father in quiet conversation with the wedding planner. Moments later, Miguel approached our table. "Your father has asked if he might say a few words," he informed me quietly. "I told him I'd need to check with you first." I hesitated, sharing a questioning look with James, who squeezed my hand supportively. "Your call," he murmured. Curiosity won out over caution. "Okay," I told Miguel. "He can speak." My father approached the microphone with uncharacteristic nervousness, clearing his throat several times before beginning. I wasn't prepared to give a speech today," he admitted, a murmur of confusion rippling through guests who didn't know the backstory. "For reasons that are personal and, frankly, not flattering to me. I wasn't aware until today that my daughter was getting married." A shocked silence fell over the room. My father continued, his voice growing steadier. "That fact alone speaks to failures on my part that I'm just beginning to understand. Olivia has always been our easy child, self-sufficient, responsible, successful, without seeming to need much from us. It became too simple to focus on her brother, who seemed to require more active parenting, more visible support." My mother watched him with wide eyes from their table, Trevor staring fixedly at his water glass. What I failed to realize, my father continued, was that by taking Olivia's self-sufficiency as a given, I was teaching her that her accomplishments, her milestones, her needs were somehow less deserving of celebration and attention. Today has been educational, to say the least. He turned to face me directly. "Olivia, I don't deserve to stand here pretending I've been the father you needed. But if you'll allow it, I'd like to dance with my daughter at her wedding. And I'd like the chance to do better going forward." The room remained silent as I considered his words. They were just words, of course, not yet backed by actions or sustained change. But they were also the first public acknowledgement of patterns that had shaped my life for decades. I stood slowly, nodding my acceptance. My father's relief was visible as he stepped toward the dance floor. The DJ, quickly catching on, transitioned to "What a Wonderful World," a song my father used to hum when I was very small, before Trevor and football consumed our family dynamics. As we began to dance, my father whispered, "I'm so sorry, Liv." I know I replied, not quite ready to offer absolution, but willing to open the door to possibility. Across the room, I saw my mother dab at her eyes, a complex emotion on her face. Trevor watched us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Perhaps relief, perhaps jealousy at the attention shift, perhaps something else entirely. When the dance ended, James joined us, shaking my father's hand firmly before reclaiming me for the next song. The tension in the room gradually dissipated as the celebration continued, the momentary drama becoming just another layer in the complex tapestry of our wedding day. Later, as James and I cut the cake and fed each other ceremonial bites, I caught my mother watching with a wistful expression. When our eyes met, she mouthed beautiful with what appeared to be genuine emotion. Small moments, tiny shifts. Not redemption, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of awareness. As the evening progressed, I found Trevor alone at the bar, nursing a beer. I approached cautiously our relationship as much a casualty of our parents' favoritism as my relationship with them. "Hey," I said, sliding onto the stool beside him. "Hell of a way to make a point, sis," he replied, but there was no malice in his tone. "It wasn't about making a point," I corrected. "It was about protecting myself while giving them one last chance." Trevor nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I never asked to be the favorite. I know I acknowledged." "That's on them, not you." He glanced at me sideways. "Your husband seems cool." "He is," I confirmed, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "He has an architect friend who designed some amazing sports facilities. You'd probably have a lot to talk about." A small connection tentatively offered and cautiously accepted. By the end of the night, as James and I prepared for our sparkler send-off, my parents approached us. My mother, who had maintained a certain emotional distance throughout the reception, suddenly embraced me with unexpected ferocity. "We should have been here from the beginning," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry we missed your ceremony." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the deeper patterns, but it was something. A crack in the facade. A beginning. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, neither accepting nor rejecting the limited apology. My father shook James's hand firmly. "Take care of each other," he said, a simple sentiment that nonetheless suggested a recognition of what had been missing in his approach to family. As James and I ran through the tunnel of sparklers toward our waiting car, I felt a lightness that had nothing to do with the champagne. The day hadn't unfolded as originally planned. It had become something more complex, more raw, and ultimately more authentic than the carefully choreographed celebration I'd imagined. In the back of the car heading toward our hotel for the night before our honeymoon departure, James pulled me close. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. I considered the question, carefully reviewing the emotional roller coaster of the day. "No," I decided. "It was messy and uncomfortable and real. Just like family." James smiled, pressing a kiss to my temple. "To new beginnings, then." "To new beginnings," I agreed, watching the city lights blur past the window, knowing that whatever happened next with my family, I had already found my home. The day after our wedding, James and I departed for our honeymoon in Santorini, leaving behind the emotional intensity of the previous day. For 2 blissful weeks, we existed in a bubble of Mediterranean sunshine, whitewashed buildings, and azure waters, deliberately postponing any further processing of family dynamics. "We'll deal with all that when we get back," James said, as we clinked glasses of local wine on our villa's terrace, the sunset painting the caldera in dramatic oranges and pinks. "This time is just for us." I agreed in principle, though my thoughts occasionally drifted to my parents and the uncertain state of our relationship. Had our wedding day confrontation been a turning point or merely a temporary disruption to established patterns? The geographical distance provided welcome perspective, allowing me to consider next steps without the immediate pressure of their presence. Upon our return to Chicago, tanned and refreshed reality awaited in the form of numerous text messages from extended family members. News of my parents' last-minute arrival at a wedding they didn't know about had spread rapidly through family networks, creating rifts and alliances I hadn't anticipated. My father's sister, Aunt Patricia, sent a particularly scathing message. "Your poor mother is devastated. What kind of daughter doesn't tell her parents about her wedding? This toxic revenge tactic was beneath you." Conversely, my mother's younger brother, Uncle David, wrote, "Having watched how they've treated you since childhood, I understand why you did what you did. Still, it's created quite the family scandal." Call me when you're ready to talk. Most surprising was a lengthy email from my grandmother, my father's mother, who had been unable to attend the wedding due to health issues. Far from the condemnation, I expected her message offered unexpected validation. Olivia, while I wish I could have witnessed your marriage, I understand your reasons better than you might think. Your grandfather and I weren't always fair in how we treated your father and his brother. We favored your Uncle Robert in many of the same ways your parents have favored Trevor. The patterns repeat themselves until someone has the courage to break them. I hope this becomes an opportunity for healing rather than further division. Your new husband sounds wonderful. I look forward to meeting him soon. Her words brought tears to my eyes, the first real acknowledgement from anyone in my family that the favoritism wasn't just my perception but a recognized pattern. The most immediate challenge came from James's family, who had witnessed the wedding day drama firsthand. His mother called 3 days after our return, her voice carefully neutral. "We're hosting Sunday dinner this weekend and would love you both to come. We've also invited your parents to welcome them properly to the family." I nearly choked on my coffee. You invited my parents? Without asking me first, Caroline sighed. Honey, they're your family. Whatever has happened, they're connected to you, which means they're connected to us now too. Building bridges seems better than reinforcing walls, doesn't it? Her logic was sound if uncomfortable. After discussing it with James, we reluctantly agreed to attend, though I insisted on setting boundaries. "I'm not ready to pretend everything's fine," I told James, as we drove to his parents' suburban home that Sunday. "I can be civil, but I won't fake forgiveness before I feel it." "No one's asking you to," he assured me, though the tension in his jaw suggested he was bracing for potential conflict. To my surprise, the dinner wasn't the awkward disaster I'd anticipated. My parents arrived bearing wine and flowers, dressed with a careful formality that signaled their own nervousness. Trevor had not been included in the invitation, a deliberate choice on Caroline's part that I silently appreciated. The conversation remained superficial through appetizers, comments about the weather, compliments on the food, general questions about our honeymoon. It was during the main course that my father cleared his throat and addressed the elephant in the room. "We've been doing some thinking since the wedding. He began setting down his fork, and we've started seeing a family therapist." This announcement stunned me into silence. My mother, looking uncomfortable but determined, continued where he left off. "We didn't react well at your wedding, Olivia. We made your moment about our hurt feelings, rather than recognizing why you felt you needed to test us that way. The therapist is helping us see patterns we didn't want to acknowledge. It's early days," my father added, "but we're committed to the process. We'd like you to join us for a session when you're ready. No pressure, no timeline." I glanced at James, who seemed as surprised as I was by this development. That's good to hear. I managed, unsure how to respond to this unexpected accountability. "I'll think about the joint session." Caroline skillfully redirected the conversation after that, asking James about an upcoming work project. The remaining dinner passed without further emotional revelations, though I caught my mother watching me with an expression I rarely saw directed my way, something like wistful regret. As we said our goodbyes in the driveway, my father attempted an awkward hug that I partially returned. My mother squeezed my hand and said quietly, "We're trying, Liv. It won't be perfect, but we're trying." On the drive home, James asked what I was thinking. "I'm cautiously optimistic," I admitted, "but also skeptical. One therapist visit doesn't erase decades of behavior." "Of course not," he agreed, "but it's a start." In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of our wedding continued to manifest in unexpected ways. Trevor called one evening asking if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. We met at a neutral cafe near my office, both clearly uncomfortable with this unprecedented one-on-one interaction. "So, therapy, huh?" I said after initial pleasantries were exchanged. Trevor nodded, rotating his coffee cup nervously. "Yeah, it's intense. They've asked me to come to some sessions too. How do you feel about that? He shrugged, then seemed to catch himself making a visible effort to engage more genuinely. Honestly, it's weird being talked about as the favored child. Like, I never saw it that way. I just thought they were supportive of my football. While being notably unsupportive of my everything, I pointed out unable to keep the edge from my voice. Trevor winced. Yeah, that's becoming clearer. The therapist had them make lists of events they'd attended for each of us over the past decade. The numbers were pretty damning. We sat in silence for a moment, two adults reassessing a shared childhood through very different lenses. I'm sorry, Liv, he said finally. I should have noticed. I should have said something. It was the first real apology I'd ever received from my brother. You were a kid too, I acknowledged reluctantly. It wasn't your responsibility to fix their parenting. Still, he met my eyes directly. I benefited from the imbalance whether I recognized it or not. That simple acknowledgement felt more healing than I'd expected. So, Trevor continued, James seems cool. I was thinking maybe we could all get dinner sometime. I'd like to get to know my brother-in-law better. It was a small olive branch tentatively extended. After a moment's consideration, I decided to accept it. He'd like that, I said. He's always wanted to understand football better. Trevor grinned, the first genuine smile we'd shared in years. That I can help with. As I walked back to my office after our coffee, I reflected on how my wedding day test had catalyzed changes I never really expected. Not instant healing or perfect resolution, but small steps toward honesty and accountability. Family dynamics built over decades couldn't transform overnight, but cracks in the foundation were beginning to let light through. That evening, I finally responded to my grandmother's email, thanking her for her insight and inviting her to dinner the following weekend to meet James properly. Her reply came within minutes. I'd be delighted, dear. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is give people the chance to be better than they've been. Her wisdom resonated deeply. The wedding day confrontation hadn't been about revenge, despite how it might have appeared. It had been about creating an inflection point, a moment of such clarity that denial was no longer possible. What happened next would depend on all of us, but at least now we were dealing with reality instead of comfortable illusions. Happy anniversary, Mrs. Bennett Parker, James whispered, placing a cup of coffee on my bedside table, exactly 1 year after our wedding day. The rich aroma pulled me from sleep as he slid back under the covers beside me. Has it really been a year? I murmured, curling into his warmth. Memories from the past 12 months flickered through my mind, not just the beautiful moments of our first year of marriage, but the complicated, ongoing evolution of my family relationships. After the wedding, my parents had continued with therapy, both as a couple and individually. To my surprise, they'd maintained their commitment to the process beyond the initial crisis response. My mother, who had initially been more resistant to acknowledging the favoritism patterns, gradually softened as the months passed. 3 months after the wedding, I finally agreed to join them for a family therapy session. Sitting in the neutral space of Dr. Winter's office, we addressed decades of hurt with painful honesty. I think I favored Trevor because he reminded me of myself, my father admitted during one particularly raw conversation. My athletic ambitions never materialized. I was living vicariously through him. My mother's revelation was even more illuminating. You were so capable, Olivia, so self-sufficient. Trevor seemed to need me more, and that made me feel necessary. I didn't realize that by not showing up for you, I was teaching you not to need me at all. These insights didn't instantly heal our relationship, but they created a framework for understanding that had previously been missing. Over the following months, small changes became noticeable. My parents began making consistent efforts to engage with my life, asking thoughtful questions about my work, remembering details I'd mentioned in previous conversations, initiating plans rather than waiting for me to coordinate. Everything. For my birthday, 6 months after the wedding, they gave me a photo album they'd created. Not just recent pictures, but childhood photos they dug out of storage, documenting achievements and moments I thought they'd forgotten or never noticed. My debate team victories. The publication of my college thesis. Small, ordinary moments that had somehow been preserved despite being overshadowed by Trevor's sports career. "We were there for more than we showed you," my mother said, as I paged through the album. "Not enough, we understand that now. But we did see you, Olivia. We just didn't know how to show it properly." Trevor and I had developed a cautious new relationship as well. Without the pressure of our parents' unbalanced attention, we discovered common ground we'd never explored. He'd started a coaching position at a local high school and often asked for my marketing advice as he built his personal brand. I found myself genuinely enjoying his company at our now monthly family dinners, something I would have thought impossible before the wedding. Now, on our first anniversary morning, James and I lingered in bed reflecting on the year's transformations. "Did you ever imagine your wedding day test would lead to all this?" he asked, tracing patterns on my shoulder. "Never," I admitted. "I thought best case scenario, they'd acknowledge the favoritism. Worst case, we'd go our separate ways. I never expected actual sustained change." James nodded thoughtfully. "Your grandmother was right about breaking patterns. You had the courage to force the issue instead of continuing the pretense." "Speaking of my grandmother," I said, glancing at the clock, "we should start getting ready. Everyone will be arriving for brunch at 11. For our anniversary, we decided on a small celebration at our condo, just family and a few close friends. My parents and Trevor would be there, along with my grandmother, James's family, and our closest friends. A year ago, the thought of such a gathering would have filled me with dread. Today, I felt only a gentle anticipation. As we prepared the food and arranged flowers, I marveled at how much had shifted in 12 months. The changes weren't perfect or complete. My mother still occasionally slipped into old patterns. My father sometimes grew quiet when confronted with past failures, and family gatherings still held moments of tension. But the pretense had been stripped away, creating space for something more authentic to grow. Our guests arrived bearing gifts and warm wishes. My mother brought her famous quiche, now made with my favorite fillings rather than Trevor's. My father helped James set up the mimosa bar, their conversation flowing easily. Trevor arrived with his new girlfriend, a soft-spoken special education teacher who brought a homemade card. As we gathered around our dining table, extended to its full length to accommodate everyone, I looked at the faces of those who had witnessed last year's wedding drama and those who had only heard about it secondhand. The story had become part of our family mythology, now referred to sometimes with humor, sometimes with lingering pain, but always with acknowledgement of its necessity. James raised his glass for a toast, to 1 year of marriage and to families that grow and change together. The glasses clinked and conversation flowed. After the meal, as people broke into smaller groups around the apartment, my grandmother beckoned me to join her on the balcony. "I'm proud of you," she said, her eyes bright despite her advancing years. "Not just for standing up for yourself at your wedding, but for giving them the chance to do better afterward." That took as much courage as the confrontation did. I squeezed her hand gratefully. I learned from the best. "Your email was the first real validation I received from anyone in the family." She nodded, watching my parents through the glass doors as they laughed at something Zoe was saying. Families repeat their patterns until someone is brave enough to point them out and insist on change. You did that. Now your children, if you choose to have them, will inherit a healthier legacy. The thought of children, something James and I had begun discussing, brought a lump to my throat. I hope so. Later, as the gathering wound down and guests began to depart, my mother pulled me aside. "Your father and I would like to give you and James a proper anniversary gift," she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a confirmation for a weekend getaway to the lake house where James had proposed. We've paid for everything, she explained. It's a small thing, but we wanted to. To show up for an anniversary since you missed the wedding, I supplied gently. She nodded, her eyes misting. Too little, too late, I hugged her. A genuine embrace, without the tension that had characterized our physical contact for years. It's never too late to start showing up, Mom. As the last guest departed, and James and I began clearing away dishes, he nudged me playfully. So successful anniversary, I surveyed our home, filled with evidence of the people who had gathered to celebrate with us, people who were learning, however imperfectly, to see and value each other more honestly. The most successful, I confirmed. Though I still can't believe my wedding day drama turned into actual family healing. James wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. That's the thing about finally telling your truth. Sometimes, people actually hear it. I turned in his arms, facing the partner who had supported me through the most challenging and rewarding year of my life. Here's to telling the truth then, and to whatever the next year brings. I'll toast to that, James agreed, sealing the sentiment with a kiss. Hey everyone, thank you so much for staying with me through this entire family journey. I'm curious, have you ever experienced a moment where standing up for yourself changed a family dynamic in ways you didn't expect? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real stories about family relationships, personal growth, and finding your voice. The karma in my story wasn't about revenge. It was about finally breaking patterns that had hurt us all for generations. Sometimes the greatest justice comes not from seeing others punished, but from watching them grow into better versions of themselves. And sometimes the person who needed to change most was me. I needed to stop accepting less than I deserved. If you enjoyed this story, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Drop a comment below about your own experiences with family favoritism or how you've handled difficult family situations. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about life's complicated but beautiful lessons. Thank you for being part of my healing journey by listening. I'll see you in the next video.